Welcome to The Point with Ana Kasparian. I'm your host, Ana Kasparian, and we have an important show for you today. We're going to talk about the state of journalism. That will be our lengthy discussion. We're specifically going to focus on investigative journalism and what the future of that will look like, considering that now digital media has entered the playing field. We're also going to talk about Yelp reviews that can come back to haunt you and how much screen time children should have. Pediatricians just recently released a report saying that kids are spending way too much time on technology. What is that doing to their brains? And finally, we're going to address Russell Brand's interview with the BBC and how he's encouraging others to avoid voting. But before we get to all of that, we are going to go to our No Filter today, where I am going to convince you guys to stop spending your money on stupid retail designer bullshit. Recently, there was a story involving a 19-year-old in Manhattan who spent $350 on a expensive Ferragamo belt at a Barney's. Now, he had the money to pay for it. He used his debit card to pay for it. But since he was a young black man, he was allegedly racially profiled, and he was investigated by the authorities because they didn't believe that this young black man had enough money to pay for this expensive belt. They thought that he stole the debit card. Now, he did show proof of his identity. He did have to call Chase and prove that that was his bank account. And of course, the heart of that story is racial profiling and how a lot of minorities have to deal with obstacles like this on a regular basis. After that story broke, there was a 21-year-old who, by the name of Kayla Phillips, who purchased a $2,500 handbag from Barney's, and she says that she experienced similar behavior from the cashier there. She said that she had to be investigated because they didn't believe that a black woman had the money to buy such an expensive purse. Now, when we covered that story, I think I used it as a bad example of how our culture needs to stop spending money on things that are extremely expensive because it's a status symbol. Now, when I did that, of course I got criticism, rightfully so, because I shouldn't have used that story as an example. That story should have been about the racial profiling and nothing more. But I do want to do some commentary on the culture that we live in today and this ridiculous emphasis on buying things that we should not be spending our money on. We are obsessed with status. We are obsessed with symbols that make us seem as though we're wealthier than we really are. We have this obsession with seeming as though we're wealthy, when in reality, all of these designers that are making these belts and these handbags for a few bucks get away with robbery because they basically get us to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for their cheap merchandise. Now, there could be an argument made that sometimes this merchandise is better quality and that's why people pay more money for it. But I'm not buying that. I think the majority of people who spend money on things like this is because they want to impress other people. Usually with women, they don't want to impress other men, they want to impress other women, which I've never understood. And with guys, I think a lot of times you hear it in rap music, you hear it in popular culture, and you think, you know what, I am going to be considered more important. I'm going to be considered better if I spend money that I don't have on these products. Now, I'm not judging others who do it. I think that this is just a culture that we live in, and it is pushed by mainstream media. And I was definitely someone who bought into that and believed that. When I was in high school, I would spend every dollar that I earned working on handbags and stupid things like that. But as I got older, I realized these people are making money off of my stupidity. Why am I allowing them to brainwash me into thinking that their product is better than something that I can buy from Target? So I just want people to be smarter with what they do and not buy into this culture. Remember when Lululemon was in a little bit of hot water because some of their yoga pants were see-through? And there was this notion that Lululemon yoga pants are totally worth $100 because, hey, you know what? They're better quality. Well, if they're better quality, why were they see-through? So anyway, of course it's your money. You get to do whatever you want with it, but be smart with it. The 19-year-old who basically got stopped for buying that $350 belt had to work for several paychecks just to pay for that belt. And it just makes me sad that that happens. I don't want our worth to be based on the products that we buy. I want us to move away from materialism. I want us to focus on who we are as individuals, who we are as people, and how that makes us great, not the stuff that we buy or the clothing that we wear. I hope you enjoyed that No Filter, and now it's time to go to our topics and meet our panelists. So let's start off with Sharon. Sharon Kyle is an adjunct law professor at the People's College of Law in Los Angeles, and along with her husband, Dick Price, publishes LA Progressive newsletter. Thank you so much for joining us, Sharon.
Thank you for having me.
Jimmy Dore is the host of The Jimmy Dore Show here on TYT Network and a comedian whose Comedy Central special Citizen Jimmy was chosen Best of 2008 by iTunes and was named one of the top 5 comedy DVDs of the year by Punchline Magazine. Jimmy, I feel like every time you come on here, there's like some new achievement that I'm finding out about.
I'm doing great. You know, things fantastic. Can't believe I still have time to do the show.
I know. It's kind of amazing. Ron Placone is a comedian, media critic, and the creator of Madness in the Message, a one-man performance lecture on mass media, as well as a TYT Network channel partner. Thank you for partnering with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's go ahead and talk about the topic that I find the most important. It has to do with the state of investigative journalism and what could possibly happen in the future. Now, news has come out indicating that Glenn Greenwald is planning on leaving The Guardian to work on a completely different venture, and Sam Seder has more on that. Let's take a look.
Glenn Greenwald, frequent guest on this program over the years, is exiting The Guardian to join, and it appears to set up a new media venture funded by the eBay founder Pierre Omidyar. Omidyar's net worth is at $8.5 billion. Joining Greenwald will be Laura Poitras and Jeremy Scahill. It's unclear at this point. I've heard reports that the site may include things like sports and culture, that it may be sort of like some type of Huffington Post model. After initially setting it up, Greenwald will be the politics editor.
Now, this venture is going to start off with $250 million in investment from this head of eBay. And I should also note that even though Sam Seder mentioned a few specifics there, we don't really know exactly what this is going to look like. But even though it sounds great because Glenn Greenwald is a great journalist and you expect quality work from him, there could be some problems when it comes to having multi-billionaires fund media ventures. So I want to open this up to the panel and ask you guys what you think about it. Sharon, let's start off with the current state of investigative journalism. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the current state of investigative journalism and the current state of journalism, period, is it's in a time of great flux. It's an exciting time. There are some major, wonderful things happening with the advent of the internet and access by hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of average people. But the downside is that the concentration of ownership is having a really bad impact on our democracy. So the state of investigative journalism is hampered by the purse strings being controlled by so few.
So let's talk about these big media conglomerates a little bit, Jimmy. I think Sharon brings up a really good point about investigative journalism. I am of the mind that investigative journalism, with the exception of a few people like Glenn Greenwald, is dead. You don't see a lot of investigative journalism these days. In fact, CNN got rid of a huge chunk of its investigative journalism. You're seeing much more in terms of commentary, and a bunch of political pundits come on and share their opinion, as opposed to people going out there and doing some real investigation into something that might be questionable within the government. But what do you think? I mean, do you think that this is a problem that we're going to solve with digital media, or will this persist?
Well, you don't think David Gregory does any investigation? You don't like the jobs Maria Buttafuoco does over at CNBC? You don't think she really
You're
gets it right?
You're making really good points here.
The problem is that the watchdogs used to be the news media, and that the criminals figured out that not only can I buy Congress, but I can also buy the watchdogs. Mm-hmm. So the watchdogs are owned by the people who they're supposed to be policing. So that's why that's why it's a joke when I say, hey, what, Brian Williams, when was the last story he broke? He didn't ever break stories. All they do is repeat talking points, corporate talking points, and misinformation. And that's why, we get the horrible government that we've been getting. And it's because an uninformed a strong democracy requires an informed electorate. And boy, that is the last thing we have right now, is an informed electorate.
You make a great point about how the mainstream media is funded by corporations. I mean, that is precisely the reason why you don't see the type of muckraking you saw decades ago. You're not going to question the people that help, pay your employees. But Ron, let me bring you in. Do you see a problem here with one billionaire essentially paying for an entire media outlet? Do you think that will have a negative impact on the type of reporting that someone like Glenn Greenwald does?
Well, I think it could. I mean, there's some things I like about this venture, some things I don't. What I do like is the fact that this kind of almost goes back to basics, to a model we had prior to the 20th century, where we had a media that was funded by ideas. It was the ideas, people came together with those ideas, schools of political thought had their own newspapers and so forth. In a way, this is kind of going back to that. On the same note, if you have, it is a for-profit venture to my understanding, so if you have this model where that's it, there's no other media policy, and that also opens the door for the Rupert Murdochs of the world to continue to flourish, so that wouldn't really help solve a lot of our problems. So I think it's a good thing, it's a good start, but eventually some media policy needs to follow.
What do we do, and let's talk about media policy a little bit, because I think that could be a little murky, especially because you have to come up with an organization or maybe a government or government employees or government officials to come about with those regulations or those standards or guidelines. And is that a good idea? Because that would be a little problematic, wouldn't it be?
You mean, you're saying government regulation of the media?
I mean, that was what I understood from your answer, but I could be wrong. Is that what you were implying?
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be some kind of regulation, because I mean, we're still seeing the effects of what lack of regulation can do. I mean, we're still feeling the effects of the Telecommunications Act, for instance. I mean, we're still feeling that.
So you're saying like cross ownership and stuff like that. Before, the rules were you couldn't own a newspaper and a television station, a radio station. So you got diversity of voices in the market, which we're not getting anymore, because all the radio and TV stations and newspapers are all owned by a handful of people.
Right, and ironically enough, in that act, they were trying to preserve diversity.
Yes.
That was the lip service they gave it, and of course they did the total opposite.
Yes. And
So the media is the only industry that is protected in the Constitution. And it's one of the reasons is because it's the cornerstone of democracy. It's one of the cornerstones of democracy. We call it the fourth estate, because without having a media that is accessible to the public, a media that provides information that helps people to be informed voters, you really are going to see the dismantling of democracy. So this concentration of ownership in the hands of a few, which really has been facilitated by the change in rules, just as Ron mentioned, that is going to have to change. I think that there is a need for standards and regulations. And as the people become less and less satisfied with the product, there'll be change. But it's only the people that can demand change.
Wouldn't you make the argument, though, that people who are unhappy with the product are kind of taking the product back and utilizing it for their own purposes? And a perfect example of that would be new media, digital media.
Right. Well, that's what the LA Progressive is.
Exactly.
It's exactly what that is. It's and there are many, many other examples where people have taken to the internet and created their own. Created many types of new media, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or blogs. There are just a plethora of new media that is available to the common person. And really, all you need is a computer, or some might argue, all you need is a smartphone to have a voice.
Absolutely.
So the Young Turks would be a good example of what you're talking about, people taking the media back. And I know when I found Cenk on the internet, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was like, oh, thank God there's a guy breaking it down, and he's respected, and he has real guests, and it's a real thing. So, which
is funny, because establishment media will look at TYT and kind of belittle it as if it's just a joke, regardless of the guests, regardless of the sources, regardless of the type of quality coverage that we do. It doesn't matter, because if you're in digital media or new media, you're not considered credible or legitimate, which is amazing.
Well, that's the old guard protecting themselves,
exactly.
Right? I mean, they'll still people who are printed in newspapers still dismissively refer to bloggers in a pejorative term. Oh, there's some blogger. It's just like, some blogger?
Yeah.
Come on, that's the world now.
That's right. But let's not forget that it was mainstream media that didn't challenge the establishment as we marched up to war looking for these weapons of mass destruction. Right. So mainstream media should be questioned.
Right. Well, and it's amazing that nobody who missed the run up to the war or missed the economic collapse, they still have their jobs. We still turn to these people to inform us. Yet they've already proven that on the two biggest issues of our generation, they've totally failed. Yet they're still the people we turn to. So I don't know, how do we change the rules? Like, because President Obama just again appointed to the head of the FCC a corporate tool. right?
Yeah.
Instead of the people, he should be appointing someone who's going to turn the airwaves back over to the people. He turns it back over to, so that's the problem people have with Barack Obama. That's the problem I have. So what do you do when the good guys are corrupt, like Barack Obama is?
Well, I mean, I don't think that you have to turn to someone like Barack Obama to find the right people to regulate the media or to basically impose the type of rules or regulations that we need. I think that with digital media, you can do everything you need to do without worrying about establishment media. People are becoming increasingly aware that what they get on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or whatever network news is not necessarily the best source of information. They're realizing that more and more people are turning to new media, and there's something really refreshing about that. So with TYT, I mean, there is no censorship. There is no corporate sponsor, and I'm not going to say that we're never going to have a corporate sponsor. We may have a corporate sponsor at one point, but one of the reasons why we don't have one now is because we refuse to allow anyone to have editorial control over us, right? So you're seeing more of these outlets pop up online, and there's something really powerful about that, because it doesn't matter what Obama does. It doesn't matter what mainstream media does. As long as people are becoming aware of the BS that they're getting in mainstream media, they're going to turn to new media. They're going to turn to digital media. And I think that that's a good way to counter what's happening with the lack of investigative journalism right now.
I hope so. Fingers crossed. What do you think?
Well, when you look at kind of just the anatomy of a revolution, so to speak, which we're kind of calling for a revolution in the information sense, you know, it really happens when the crisis is apparent. And I think you're right. More and more people, because, I mean, a lot of the stuff we've hinted at here, this main corporate media, which I try to refer to them as the corporate media, not the mainstream media, because I think there's nothing mainstream about them. They're the corporate media. They're serving corporate interests, and they're so determined to serve the status quo that that's apparent on how they're missing the mark on stuff like war and things like movements. I mean, the way they trivialize social movements, the way they trivialize independent media outlets, the Young Turks and others. People are starting to see through that. And when people start demonstrating that through action, by doing their own thing, by migrating to other sources, eventually policy will inevitably follow.
Absolutely.
It's tough to know exactly what that will look like at this point in time.
That's right.
But it will follow.
And it's a messy thing. You know, democracy is a messy thing. But I think ultimately it's the people that are going to call the shots, because power concedes nothing without a demand. And I wish I could quote who made that statement, but it's true. And it's been demonstrated time and time in history. Until the people stand up, and unfortunately, it does take crisis. But I remember when the Occupy movement was here in Los Angeles, and the LA Progressive was covering it. And we were covering it from day one. And on about day 14 or 15, I looked over the crowd and I saw a local newscaster from one of our local news television stations. She was there with her camera person. And I know her personally, and I walked up to her and I said, great, finally we're going to get some coverage on regular television. And she says, unfortunately, I'm not here to cover. I'm covering the Michael Jackson's doctor. That trial was going on at the same time. Right, that was going on at the same time. And her bosses had insisted that she says, so we just got out, so I had to come over and see what was happening here.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
But until the people demand, there will be no change.
So what do you think about government intimidation of journalists? You know, after Michael Hastings died in a terrible car accident, there were a bunch of conspiracy theories that the government was after him. Of course, you know, we have absolutely no proof that that's the case, but a lot of journalists do feel intimidated by the government because we know that the NSA is spying on us. We know that the NSA knows exactly what we're doing in our personal lives. And I had a conversation with a colleague who said, I don't know if I'm really up for this. I don't know if I want to be, you know, a muckraking journalist. I don't know if I want to go after the government, knowing that there's a possibility that the government can come after you. So do you guys think that in the future, or even right now, that's doing something to hinder the development of investigative journalism?
Well, of course it is. I mean, look what's happened to the leakers. I mean, the Justice Department in the Obama administration is more oppressive, or is reportedly more oppressive than any other administration when it comes to bringing charges against leakers. Look what's happened to Snowden. Look what happened to Chelsea Manning. So yes, that type of oppressive control does hamper free speech, and it does make people take a second look at whether or not they want to pursue. But ultimately, history has proven people will stand up. And I think that in time that will happen here too.
Our liberal champion from California, Dianne Feinstein, is pushing legislation to define what a journalist is. She's going to define what a journalist is, which I think lets us define exactly what she is.
Wait, Jimmy, are you saying that there's a problem with politicians defining what a journalist is?
I would think that might be a problem.
You're crazy.
I think Tony Soprano wants to also define what a cop is, and you know what I mean. And Don Mattingly wants to define what an umpire is. It's like you don't get to do that. You don't get, as a politician, decide who gets to criticize you and who doesn't get to criticize you, and who gets to expose your lies and who doesn't.
Yeah.
It's called freedom of speech, and like she said, journalism is one of the 3 professions mentioned in the Constitution. So it's pretty important to the way our democracy is supposed to function. And Dianne Feinstein, and then they pretend she goes, well, I don't think some 17-year-old blogger is a journalist sitting in his mom's basement. Well, then what are you fucking afraid of? Are you afraid of a 17-year-old blogger who's going to get some secrets that you have?
That's precisely what she's afraid of. And just to give you guys some more context into what Jimmy is talking about, the reason why the Senate Judiciary Committee wanted to redefine or decide what a journalist is because they want to ensure that whistleblowers and certain, journalists that question authority are not protected under SHIELD laws, so they can be prosecuted against.
Yes.
So it is a freedom of speech issue, and I think it's ridiculous for a politician to define what a journalist is. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this topic, but we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Yelp reviews. A lot of times people use Yelp reviews to get back at a restaurant that had terrible customer service, but what happens when the business comes after you? Stick around. Welcome back to The Point. Oftentimes people use Yelp to write negative reviews about a business that they were unhappy with. Maybe it was the customer service, maybe it was the quality of the food, but it's really rare to find good reviews on Yelp. But recently there was this novelist who used Yelp to complain about a custom tailor who refused to get back to him. And he was so annoyed with the lack of customer service that he wrote this really scathing review on Yelp. Well, he claims that literally minutes after he wrote that review, an employee from the custom tailor called him back and said, or wrote back to him and said, if you don't take that down, we are going to write negative reviews about your book. I don't know how this guy knew that this novelist's book was coming out soon, but of course the novelist was very, very concerned about it, and after a few back and forth conversations, he decided, you know what, I'm just going to take the review down. I don't want this to hurt, my book in any way, shape, or form. So, Jimmy, I love talking about reviews online because there's always a lot of controversy. There are politics behind online reviews. With a company like Yelp, if someone does write a positive review about you or your business, you actually have to pay them to make sure that they don't hide those positive reviews.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
We did. You guys need to check out that Point episode, okay? Just check it out in our archives because it was good.
Kidding.
It was good. So I have my issues with Yelp, but what do you think about people using it as like a strike back tool?
Well, it's happening, but I just think that who uses their real name on Yelp, right? You can go anonymous on Yelp. Why did that guy let everybody know that he's who he is?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, he was very specific about his experience, so I'm guessing that this custom tailor knew who it was.
Oh, yeah,
and so he went after him.
Okay, okay. You know what? I've seen that happen. It's funny that a manager I've given negative reviews on Yelp, and all of a sudden the manager will be right on it, and it's like, oh really? Where were you that day, or what? Or they'll respond to like correct me on something. I'm like, so all that other stuff didn't matter. You're upset about. So it's weird. I like Yelp a lot. I really do. I think it's good. I did not know that you have to pay them to show their positive reviews.
So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of whatever page you're looking at, usually there'll be like a very small link that says hidden. And if you click on that link, it's very, very hard to find it, but if you click on that link, then you'll see all of the reviews that have been hidden. Some of them are negative, but usually the vast majority of them are positive, right?
Yeah.
And then the business will get notified that, hey, if you want to optimize, your Yelp page, one thing that you can do is, work with us, and we can make sure to put the positive reviews higher on the page so people see it.
I like that so if you have a complaint, the management can then respond to your complaint on Yelp, and then you can respond to the manager.
Yeah.
So I like it. I think that's a good thing. And the same thing with the book review. That guy's a little bit of a wimp, right?
Oh, damn. You're going to call him a wimp.
I think he's a little bit of a wimp. Yeah, if somebody comes and gives a negative review of your book, you can also on Amazon.com, if that's where they're reviewing or whatever, you can also then go put a rebuttal to their review of you. This is a guy who doesn't like, and it's obvious.
This sounds like a lot of, like a huge waste of time. I got to be honest.
Exactly. Are you worried you're going to get 4 bad reviews? Is that the only? Anyway, it's just he seemed a little wimpy.
Yeah. All right, Ron, what do you think? Have you written a negative review before?
I have written a negative review on Yelp before. I've never gotten any feedback from it, but I mean, I agree. I think Yelp is a good thing, but the one thing I always take into account as a consumer when I go to those places is that I think usually people don't go on there when they have something nice to say.
Of course.
So you have to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, absolutely. You really have to kind of sift through it and kind of be your own filter. I don't know if everybody does that or not. I have no clue. But yeah, I mean, I think in this case, I mean, that was such a random threat to make, and it was very, it would have been false because they wouldn't have read the book. They just would have posted this mean thing online for the sole purpose of this, a rebuttal, retribution. And this guy would have had the proof on his side. So I don't know. In a way, it could have led to some really good publicity for his book, I think.
That's true. Some people actually accused him of making all of this up for publicity, but of course, there's no way to verify that. Sharon, what do you think about Yelp? I mean, an argument can be made that these review sites really damage a lot of businesses because Ron is absolutely right. Oftentimes, people who do have positive things to say don't write a review. It's usually the people who have negative things to say, and then that can really destroy a business.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit that I'm one of those people who, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Right. And there have been times when I have had something not so nice to say, and then I've just said it directly to the business or written them a letter and not posted it. But having said that, I say that they serve a purpose. And I think freedom of speech is extremely important. Again, one of the cornerstones of this democracy. Whether or not we like what people are saying, they have the right to say it, and I support that.
I also like how sites like Yelp allow people to be like these semi-citizen journalists, right?
Yeah.
Like you go out there and you do a review of a movie theater, or you do a review of whatever establishment that you went to, and some of them are actually written very well. It's like impressive. It's like, hey, you want a job?
Yeah. And I rely on them, like sites like Amazon.
Right.
I rely on a lot of those reviews to tell me whether or not I should purchase a book.
Yes.
Yeah, fair enough. I think a lot of people do. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and it has to do with digital media, technology, and what pediatricians feel is appropriate for children. So recently, the American Academy of Pediatrics had a few recommendations for children, especially when it comes to the amount of screen time they get. But before we get to the specifics of that, let's hear what Louis C.K. had to say about his own children and smartphones.
Some parents really struggle with, like, all the other kids have the terrible things, so my kid has to. Yeah, let your kid go and be a better example to the kids. Just because the other stupid kids have phones doesn't mean that, okay, well, my kid has to be stupid, otherwise she'll feel weird.
Right.
I think these things are toxic. Especially for kids. It's just this thing. It's bad, and they don't look at people when they talk to them, and they don't build the empathy.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics has the following suggestions and recommendations. They said that too much TV and other media use have been tied to obesity, sleep and school problems, and aggression. Children under 2 years should only be watching TV and other screens for about 2 hours a day, nothing more than that. And they also say that parents should keep children's rooms free from TV and internet access, which sounds terrible. I always had a TV in my room. I always had internet access as soon as we had a computer. I can't imagine not having the access to it. But they make good points because it could really screw with the development of kids. If they're under the age of 2, they shouldn't have any access to digital media. But who knows? Maybe they're making a really great point. I want to open this up to you guys. Ron, what do you think? Do you think that this the American Academy of Pediatrics is dead on?
I don't know, dead on. I mean, I think, yes, they have a point. On the other side, this whole kind of fear of embracing technology, I mean, we can trace that back to writing and Socrates, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, we have this long history of kind of doing that. And the fact is, the internet's here, it's not going anywhere, and kids should learn how to utilize it and use it as a valuable tool, which it has the potential to be. On the other side, there are a lot of really good studies out there that indicate that the internet does hurt attention spans. It deteriorates spelling ability. And a lot of kids that are, at these kind of ages of growth where they're developing those skill sets, I do think that too much use could really hurt that. And they need to focus on that. They also need to learn how to use a library and stuff like that, and not just know the internet.
Do they really? Do you think that it's important to learn how to use a library?
I think so, yeah, because I think you develop other ways of conducting research when you're actually when you have a tangible book and you're doing research that way. You're using different articles and so forth. That's different than just kind of going on the internet, even if you're on an academic database or something.
That's fascinating. I would actually disagree with that, but
I think it's important to preserve libraries for the next generation of kids who aren't going to use them. And I don't know how to use a library, but I think we talk about the people not knowing how to use their phones or the technology. See, the technology is faster than our culture can catch up to it, right? So we haven't created mores, norms, and ways to deal with these things. And it especially when someone doesn't even know the right volume. What is it about a cell phone and people's volume that they have to go louder, as if it's not two strings in a cup? Let the technology work for you. You don't have to scream so they can hear you. Are you all the way in Indiana? Don't worry, the electric works.
I thought that one of the things that was interesting about this report is that it didn't address some of the things I thought it would have addressed, which is the physiological impacts of having children that are, at formative ages seated in a position for longer periods than they should. And when you look at ergonomics or the impacts that it could have on their eyes, that kind of thing, I think I would have appreciated much more than the suggestions that they made. I think that the suggestions that they made, any common sense parent would know these things already.
Definitely. I mean, I want to know what a cell phone does to your brain when you're holding it close to your head.
Yes.
Those types of things are
right.
definitely more fascinating than just a bunch of suggestions. And I don't want to say speculation as to what it will do to a child's development, but I feel like I would want them to elaborate a little more on why these recommendations exist. Now, they do make a really good point, and Louis makes a good point in that video about how we have become so obsessed with social media, with technology, that we're kind of losing communication, face-to-face communication with people. You see people buried in their phones all the time. And it kind of, that definitely does hinder emotional development that you could possibly have with a person.
I don't know. I mean, I think it could be argued that what's changed, the technology is changing the ways, the mechanisms, the ways that we communicate. But it doesn't necessarily change the fact that we do communicate.
Right.
And that's essential to being human.
Well, that's true, but at the same time, face-to-face communication requires eye contact. And when you're making eye contact while you communicate, you develop this emotional attachment to someone.
FaceTime.
FaceTime is really important. Definitely. There's no question about that. And also, another thing that I worry about is children not getting enough physical activity because they're sitting down and they're watching a screen or they're playing a video game. The best part of my childhood was going out there, riding my bike, playing with my neighborhood friends and just enjoying my childhood. So,
well, it's weird too, is that we've become such a technology culture that, people don't understand the difference between FaceTime and other way of communicating through Twitter or email or texting all the time, and nobody wants to talk to you. For God forbid I called you and you pick up. Holy shit! Please let it go to your machine. So we're not caught up yet. We don't know what we're doing. I don't think we know what we're doing.
Do we ever know what we're doing? I mean, isn't that why we're here, to kind of learn what to do?
Yes, I guess you're right. And the big difference, I think, between like electronic communication and this kind of communication face-to-face is like the difference. Like, I didn't go see a live concert until I was almost 20 years old. And I was like, live music kicks ass, right? So it's a big difference between watching a video or like we're comedians. People come out and see live comedy. They're like, it's so much better. Yes, it's better in person. This is how you're supposed to interact with people.
Right, good point. All right, we got to take one more quick break. Let's do that, and when we come back, we are going to talk about Russell Brand's controversial interview with the BBC. Welcome back to The Point. Our final topic has to do with a controversial interview that Russell Brand had with the BBC. He was specifically talking to Jeremy Paxson, and during the interview, I will say that it seemed as though Russell Brand was being belittled a little bit, but that is the type of way that he usually conducts his interviews, according to our UK viewers. Even if he does conduct his interviews that way, I still didn't appreciate the way he spoke to Russell Brand because I thought that he was making good points. I didn't like him being belittled, but I'm giving you guys too much, okay? Let's just watch a really quick clip, and then I'll give you more context.
Is it true you don't even vote?
Yeah, no, I don't vote.
Well, how do you have any authority to talk about politics then?
Well, I don't get my authority from this pre-existing paradigm, which is quite narrow and only serves a few people. I look elsewhere for alternatives that might be of service to humanity.
You don't believe in democracy.
need
You want a revolution, don't you?
The planet is being destroyed. We are creating an underclass. We are exploiting poor people all over the world. And the genuine, legitimate problems of the people are not being addressed by our political class.
All of those things may be true. What's the scheme? You talk vaguely about revolution. What is it?
I think a socialist egalitarian system based on the massive redistribution of wealth, heavy taxation of corporations and massive responsibility for energy companies and any company that's exploiting the environment. I think they should be, I think the very concept of profit should be hugely reduced. David Cameron says profit isn't a dirty word. I say profit is a filthy word, because wherever there is profit, there is also deficit. And this system currently doesn't address these ideas. And so why would anyone vote for it? Why would...
It got really hot in here. So I just want to make a quick point about a question that was asked. Paxson said, you don't believe in democracy, you want a revolution. There are revolutions in the name of democracy.
Yes.
So that question in and of itself really frustrated me, because I would argue that our current democratic process is being violated right now. Our current democracy is being destroyed right now. So to say you don't believe in democracy, you want a revolution, already puts you on the wrong side in my book. But anyway, and that's not to say that his other journalistic work has been terrible or bad. I'm sure he's done great work, but I didn't like the way he handled that interview. With that said, let's talk about the substance of what Russell Brand was saying in his answers. I thought that he made a lot of really great points about what's happening with corporations, the lack of taxation, the lack of regulation. I mean, those are issues that we've talked about on the Young Turks over and over again. But at the same time, he is basically saying that he does not vote. And he seems to encourage people to not vote because the current system is so broken. Sharon, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's a fascinating idea. In preparation of today, I did a little bit of research of the history of the non-vote. And there are several ways to participate in not voting. You can actually go to the polls and just not select anyone and turn in your ballot. And that makes a powerful statement. Mm-hmm. And this whole issue of voter apathy, what we've seen in this country, in my congressional district, in certain elections, we have voter turnout that is as low as 8%. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a real telling message. And what the message says to me is that we have a populace that is unengaged, apathetic, and has no confidence in our system. And I think that is a threat to democracy. It's a message that the politicians need to hear and that the media needs to hear. So I think that it's really important what Russell Brand was saying. We do need a shift and a redistribution.
Absolutely.
And one of the ways to send that message could possibly be by not voting.
Can I say that I agree with everything she said, and I just want to make it was very telling that the interviewer revealed himself, I think, a little in his question when he said, well, what authority do you have to say these things? First of all, you don't need authority to say stuff. You don't need authority. It's called free speech. It's called democracy, like you said. So you don't need authority. So that's this whole guy's paradigm, is that you have to have authority. First, people have to say you have authority, be able to say something, and then for us to leave, you can't. So that was very revealing of that guy. And I'm not a huge Russell Brand fan. That seemed like a pretty good excuse of why he hadn't voted, or that whole thing of that could be a reason why people aren't more engaged, because they don't really feel like the system speaks to them. But the fact that he's not personally voting, I think that's not good. Those are just rationalizations for not being more involved. Mm-hmm. And
but I believe in the reasons why Russell Brand doesn't want to vote. I think that there are definitely, when it comes to low voter turnout, there are definitely people out there who are not engaged because they are apathetic. They just don't care about politics. They are not informed about it, and they don't feel comfortable voting. And then there are those who feel that the system is broken and their vote does not count. It's not going to make a difference. And I think that Russell Brand falls under that category. He's actually very politically engaged. I mean, I've seen his work before. I've seen many videos where he's done his political commentary, and I was just blown away by how intelligent and how informed he is. But the question is, I mean, I voted for Jill Stein in the last election. What did that get me? Dick, right? That didn't matter. We have a system right now, you know, with the Electoral College that doesn't really allow me to have my voice heard. So, and that's a big problem as well.
We don't have, I would like to, you know, I think one of the solutions is maybe we get back to one man, one vote in America, which is not what we have right now, right? So if you live in Wyoming, your vote counts for about 66 times more than my vote counts for in California because of the disproportionate representation in the Senate. And if you notice, since 1900, there's been about 100 new democracies that have sprung up in the world. None of them use our system. They all use a parliamentary system.
Right.
So when you go back to the Electoral College, it's not only that, it's the way the Senate is set up. So we can get to a position where 70-80% of the people want something like gun control or a public option, and it doesn't even come close. And that's so what happens when government isn't responsive to the people anymore, and we're having this kind of just a plutocracy is what's happening right now. So I don't mean to hog your time. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree with that. And I can also see the purpose of almost you're making a statement by not voting or by voting for a Jill Stein. The reason I wasn't 100% on board with what Russell Brand said about never voting, you know, I think you also have to take into account voting doesn't just mean in a presidential election. Voting also means on a lot of local levels. And when you have a more civically engaged populace, and I'm basing this off of, you know, I've lived in a few different places over the past few years. Some have been a little more civically engaged than others. You know, when you have a more civically engaged place, there's more things on the ballot, more initiatives that were brought forward, that were pushed through grassroots action and so forth. And to really get that through, that also involves showing up at the poll and casting your vote for a certain initiative. So when you're going to say, well, I'm never going to vote, I never vote, well, you're missing out on a lot of important opportunities.
So voting is one way to be civically engaged, but true civic engagement is more holistic. I mean, yes, you can vote, but you can be active on a particular issue. You can run for office, I mean, although it's difficult to see someone running for office who doesn't vote, but there are lots of ways to be civically engaged. And the lack of voter participation in this United States is a reflection of our lack of civic engagement. So I think what we really need to be talking about is why is there a lack of civic engagement? Why is it that our politics is so irrelevant to so many people? And you, Jimmy, you just brought up two important points about, you talked about gun control and how we know that in the United States, the average person wants to have some kind of meaningful, smart gun control, yet we just can't seem to make that happen. So I think we know as a people that our voices are not being heard, no matter whether we vote or don't vote.
Yeah, and when it comes to low voter turnout, I think that there are many factors at play. We have a lack of quality media in the mainstream. We have distractions. People are much more interested in seeing what the Kardashians are doing as opposed to seeing what's happening with our government and some of the injustices that we're dealing with. And of course, we have those who feel that our system is broken and it doesn't matter whether or not they get politically involved. So these are all problems that we hope to address sometime in the future. We'll see if it happens. But I will say that in the past, you know, the one glimmer of hope to me was the Occupy movement, and of course we had the corporate media come in and stomp on that. So I hope that people do rise up, and I hope they do become more politically active, because that's really our only hope. And I love that people like Russell Brand use their celebrity to spread ideas like this, regardless of whether or not you believe in what he's saying. All right, unfortunately we're out of time. I want to give you guys a chance to plug some of the work that you've worked on or are working on. Sharon, please tell our audience where they can learn more about your magazine.
Okay, so the LA Progressive is an online social justice magazine which can be found at laprogressive.com. But in addition to the LA Progressive, my husband is the editor and I'm the publisher. We've just launched a new site, which is the Progressive Media Team. Frequently, small startup, boots on the ground kinds of organizations contact us and they ask us for help with social media, help with developing websites. So we have launched the Progressive Media Team, which is there to help any small effort that would like to have a bigger online presence.
Awesome. Jimmy.
So I just finished writing a book called Your Country's Just Not That Into You, and it'll be coming out next spring, and you can listen to my podcast at jimmydorecomedy.com and check me out, the TYT Comedy Jimmy Dore Show.
Damn right. And Ron.
My name is Ron Placone. You can go to my website, ronplacone.com. I have a one-man performance lecture called Madness in the Message that addresses a lot of the issues, particularly that we talked about in the first segment, I'd love to come to your university. I kind of do that exclusively at colleges. Part of the TYT network, so youtube.com/Ron Placone. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm really active on Radio Free Nashville, and we're getting ready to go citywide, so there's a lot of fun stuff going on there.
God, so many talented panelists we have on this show. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, well, I'm Ana Kasparian. You guys know where you can check me out on theyoungturks.com, Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And, of course, we will be back with another episode of The Point in a week. So until then, sit tight, check out all our other awesome shows on our network, and please subscribe and comment below. We love hearing from you. We'll see you later.